So one aspect of this perspective of learning as communication is science of learning, and how do we understand science of learning? We can never know how an individual is thinking. But what we can do is to observe what kind of science are these people, or what kind of science is this individual producing. So science of learning is important, and it's not always that we recognize it. I just give you a very small and personal example of that. When I was going to the kindergarten to fetch my youngest daughter, she was sitting and made a drawing, and she was painting a black line and a small little red point. And the teacher went by and said, "What a nice drawing you made." And I felt a bit upset. What does she mean by nice drawing? So the day before, we had been at the Museum of Natural History. And there she was very engaged in a bird called the bloodbird. And she was actually drawing the bloodbird. So I sat down and asked her, "What are you doing?" "It's a bloodbird." And then I thought, what a wonderful example of where you could start to talk about nature, birds, how you observe birds, how you can know about birds, and so on. So that was a starting point for me, trying to understand what is sign making and how can we interpret signs. So this is some kind of, what would we say when I was young, scribble, nothing, playing around. And this is about a thunderstorm and a little child who is going out, and a mother who tells the little child to come back in. So actually there's a whole story. It might be that the story is constructed because I asked her, but still it's some kind of meaning making. So sign making and meaning making are very important aspects of learning from this perspective. And from the clues I have given you, of course you would understand what this is. It's from the Museum of Natural History, and in the entrance there was a huge whale skeleton in the ceiling, and you can see that this skeleton is huge. And this is a skeleton, and then we can discuss how does a skeleton function? How big can it be? How can it move? Does it move? So there are lots of interesting questions that follow from this very elementary sign making, but still it's sign making. So this leads to some kind of understanding of knowledge and learning. So knowledge is about the capacity to engage in the world in a meaningful way, or to be more specific, capacity to use an established order of signs. So if you're in medical studies, is one world of science that differs from other worlds, and you have to be able to use and engage in this world in a meaningful way. So learning then is an increased capacity to engage in the world and to take part. And more specifically, an increased capacity to use or even change an established order of science. And science could be verbal science or also science in terms of tools, of course. And thus, this idea led to the next question about learning design sequences. How can we understand learning from this point of view? So now we come to how we can understand learning, but also how we can study learning. And this is a very elementary model, and it's perhaps stupid to make a model like this one, but it has worked out rather interesting. It's about a situation, and in this situation there are some kind of resources and norms. And there is some kind of challenge or something I don't understand. I have to learn, and I transform information with one medium, one kind of semiotic resource or another, and I construct an understanding, an inner picture, or I show it in my behavior. So I usually use this example when I moved to Stockholm in the 70s, I went on the bus to the city and I started to talk to the driver. And what do you think all the other people said in the queue behind me? Because where I came from, there was time to talk to the driver. So the next morning I didn't talk to the driver. Usually we don't think of this as learning, but this is a very elementary case of learning. I am in a situation, something is happening, I try to understand it, and I show my understanding in changed behavior and in changed way of talking, of course. So if we take this as an elementary model, we can use that as a basis for more elaborated learning situations.